All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and for filling out the survey ahead of time to let us know your familiarity with the tools we're talking about today and gaming in general. Looks like a lot of you that did fill out the survey are new to using scenario games, so that's great. We have a lot of information to share. And it looks like a lot of you are also new to hearing about the game agency. Some of you haven't used eLearning Brothers before, and it seems like a lot of you have used Vyond. So thank you so much for letting us know that so we can sort of tailor the content just a bit as we go throughout the webinar. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Amanda, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at Vyond. This is the agenda for today's webinar. We are going to have the Training Arcade, eLearning Brothers, and Vyond talk to you about how to deliver scenario training with virtual characters, challenges, and gamified branching paths. Julia from the game agency will talk about soft skills and share her best practices for game making. And we'll also show you 3 soft skills games specific to customer service training, sales enablement, and internal communication. Then we're going to show you how they were created with eLearning Brothers and Vyond. So now I would like to introduce our speakers for today. We have Erin, my coworker, sitting right next to me. She's our Senior Customer Success Training Manager. And at the end of the webinar, she'll be talking about how to use Vyond for many of you who have not used Vyond before. We also have Julia Dittar, a game and UX designer, joining us from the game agency in New York. She has a lot of really great tips about designing games and scenarios that I think you will find really interesting and useful. And then we also have Trent Howell from eLearning Brothers, the VP of Marketing, to talk about their asset library and how to find things that you can use to add to your courses. So now let's kick it over to Julia to get started and jump right into the content. Julia?
Hi, everyone. All right, just give me a second to get set up. All right. All right, can everyone see my screen? Can everyone hear me? All right.
Yes,
See that?
Great.
Yes. All right, great. All right, so thanks. I'm Julia Dittar from the game agency, and I'm going to go over soft skills, scenarios, and best practices. All right, so what are soft skills? So according to Indeed, soft skills include any skill that can be classified as a personality trait or habit. That means communication, teamwork, leadership, empathy and integrity, conflict resolution, and problem solving. So why soft skills training? Well, there's a need to hire, find, and retain people with good soft skills. Closing the Technology Leadership Gap Study came out with a report that said 67% of HR withhold positions due to the lack of finding people with good soft skills. And an internal company study at Google found that 7 out of 8 of the most important job skills that they interview for are soft skills, unlike what you might think, such as STEM skills. So despite this trend, most companies don't invest in improving these skills after hiring a candidate. And that's because soft skills are very hard to teach or to train for. They're not something that can be easily picked up just by reading content material like a book or an instructional page. These are skills that have to be explored, experimented with, and practiced, and learned through via trial and error. So why scenarios? Why are we talking about scenarios today? Well, we're discussing scenarios, which are also known as branching path games or interactive narratives, because they are great tools to teach soft skills. This is because they act much like a sandbox where people can model and explore behaviors. They're encouraged to experiment, to play and understand consequences and decisions in a safe space. So what exactly is a scenarios game? An interactive narrative is one where learners can make choices in a situation that affect the outcome in some way. And although you might not think of them as, kinds of well-known experiences of games, scenarios or branching narratives have been around for a long time. First, they were choose your own adventure books where you would read a book, flip through it, and then depending on the choices, you were assigned a page that would jump you around, changing the narrative depending on your choices that you made. And they're used a lot by both large AAA game companies as well as smaller indie game studios. A classic example is the Knights of the Old Republic by BioWare, where depending on the choices that you made as a Jedi would decide whether you were following the light or the dark side of the Force. And these are formats that aren't just for games, they're moving into film as well. So Bandersnatch last year premiered on Netflix and was one of the most talked about shows. It's a very simple interaction with just 2 choices that you make via your TV remote, and yet you can get amazingly different story outcomes. There's something inherently fun about all of these experiences, exploring a world through the choices that you make. These games allow you to be different people, to assume different personalities, and to experience the world through the lens of others. And this is why Scenarios is such a great game for soft skills learning. It lets you play all of these different roles, go through all of these different experiences, and learn the consequences of your actions in a safe space. So let's talk a little bit more about how to use this powerful system to create engaging learning tools for soft skills. I'll be going over a few best practices. The first one is that choices should be meaningful. Does this make sense in the situation? Would I actually do this? Are the answers clearly wrong or correct? When you're training or when you're creating a scenarios game for training, you need to think about what's the situation you want your employees or your learners in. What are the things that you want them to do or avoid? What are the common mistakes? Instead of thinking about this as a multiple choice in which one choice is correct and all the others are wrong, think about it as the things or the options that I could possibly do as an employee at this point. What are the things that make sense for me? If you're presented with information that just doesn't make sense, it's either clear that which one's correct or which one you want me to go down, or it just limits my choices and you don't get very good data. Likewise, choices need to be meaningful, right? If I am looking at a whole bunch of choices and they all seem to be the same, as a learner, I might not understand what you're trying to get at. For an example, let's say I am learning about intercommunication at a company and I need to get some information from my coworker. If you as an instructional designer give me these 3 examples, like ask for a summary report or talk about the report or ask nicely for their summary report, I might be confused about what exactly you want me to do. These don't seem to be meaningful choices in this situation. They all seem to be the same. A lot of times this happens when instructional designers don't know exactly what they want to distill out of this situation. They don't know what this could be that you're asking nicely for the summary report. It could be because you're looking at etiquette instead of the process. So knowing exactly what you want to teach is really important for providing a good group of choices for your learners. Let's say it's about process. If I know that ahead of time as an instructional designer, I can come up with better choices. So something like asking for a follow-up email, getting the information right on the call, or maybe scheduling another meeting. These are a lot better choices in terms of situations that I can do or actions I can take and then following through and seeing what happens. Making more than 4 choices can lead to paralysis. We found that between 2 and 4 choices are really optimal. And if you have a lot more than 4 choices, you're going to lead to choice paralysis. We've all experienced this with tools like Netflix, where you can go in and want to watch something, but there's so many options, you spend a lot of time trying to figure out what exactly you should watch for the evening. And the same thing can happen in a scenarios game if you design it with too many choices. You kind of want to keep your options limited, so not only to reduce the content that you need, but to also prevent choice paralysis in your learners. Keep text short and keep dialogue believable. Having a lot of text on the options can lead to fatigue for learners. It's okay to have a lot of text for dialogue if this coworker is telling me something or a story and that involves a paragraph of information, that's okay. But having a paragraph of information in choices is really problematic. For one, it just requires a lot of reading. And for 2, I have to sort through all of this information to try to figure out what is the actual action that I'm taking as a learner. And this ends up being more about reading comprehension than it does about challenging me in the situation to come up with a decision that is meaningful and impactful. Likewise, dialogue needs to be believable. If I'm talking to a customer, or if I'm talking to a client, I need them to sound like a human being. They need to talk like how they would normally sound. They shouldn't sound like they're reading from a textbook, or they shouldn't sound like they are, sounding like some sort of robot. They need to sound believable in their actions. Allow learners to explore and let them go down wrong paths. So don't just end the simulation abruptly if the user makes a mistake. The magic of scenarios is to provide a safe space for them to fail. Let them go down wrong paths, let them explore what happens when they make mistakes, and let them find out the consequences of those actions. These are all really important because that is what is inherently fun about these games. It's not necessarily getting a high score, it's about making a choice and seeing what happens with that choice. And that's also what makes them so effective as soft skills tools. Let them play out those mistakes and let them see what happens when you make them. Let your next feedback be what happens in the game. If I am making a wrong choice for some reason, let's say I need to get information from this coworker that I have a call on, and for some reason, maybe I choose to ask him for that information right away, and for some reason that's the wrong one. Instead of immediately having the game tell me, oh, that's wrong, it should have been this, let the game itself tell me, right? So instead have that person say like, oh, I gotta go now and I can't give you that information. And that can be followed up by limiting my choices. So if I go down a wrong path, then you can knock off some of the available choices for me so that I can't actually get that information, and I'll know that I've done maybe a suboptimal choice previously. And this is important because if you break the game right after I make a feedback, you take me out of that experience, right? It's interrupting my sense of being in a space and actually talking to someone. And it also gives me that information out of context. You're telling me before I actually know why it was a wrong choice. It is important to have detailed feedback, but save that for the end of the game. After the scenario has played out, after I've figured out what the results were of my actions, then go through the meaningful choices and tell me exactly why something was wrong or why it wasn't. But in the meantime, before that happens, let the scenario or the story tell me what exactly is off. Choices don't always have to be major tests. In scenarios, you use a lot of choices to actually promote the story. They're a narrative tool as much as they are a grading tool. So not every choice has to be right or wrong. You can use choices to show time passing. You can use choices to have the story passing or continuing. You can use choices to limit my options because I went down a wrong path, for example. So when you make these training tools, you're only going to have a handful of actions that are actually very, very meaningful, and the other choices that you make are going to help drive the story and the consequences forward. So know that if you do have a situation where both lead to the same place or both are just as good as one another, that's okay. You don't always have to have a right and wrong answer. Avoid the uncanny valley. This is especially important when dealing with human interactions, which a lot of soft skills involve. The uncanny valley happens when art, especially computer graphics, tends to be so lifelike that it ends up feeling robotic. And this is a problem because if you're testing me on my ability to relate to somebody or have empathy towards somebody, if I think that your training tool is me talking to a cyborg, even subconsciously, that's going to affect my results. So you want to try to avoid that. If you are going to go for something very, very realistic, it's best to stick toward lifelike film or photographs of actual people. But also don't be afraid to use animated or abstracted characters. There are plenty of great films and video games that convey a lot of emotional response using animations. It does not have to be lifelike for me to bond or project a relationship to that person that I'm interacting with. And lastly, remember that your users are smart. So read the, Adding unnecessary navigational text not only adds more text to the screen that needs to be read by a learner, but it can also come off as condescending. So for example, if you have text that say, click on the continue button to continue, and I'm playing this game as part of a mandatory training, I'm gonna come into this training feeling a little bit undervalued, right? And you kind of wanna avoid this. Scenarios is a really simple interfacing game. You have an action that happens, you have a few options that you can take in another action that happens. There shouldn't be a lot of confusion in terms of navigation. If you do feel like you need to have text in order to tell somebody how to navigate through the web experience, then you might want to rethink your UI to make it a little bit more clear instead of adding that instructional text. All right, I've talked a lot about best practices and I'll be talking about process next, but in the meantime, are there any questions?
Thanks so much, Julia. We did have a lot of questions from people throughout your talk so far. I'm going to ask a couple right now, and then we will save more for the end, but please keep your questions coming. A couple of the questions that people had, the first question that came in is, how did we add a video to a PowerPoint presentation? That was actually a GIF at the beginning. You can export that from Vyond. Another question came in about, for you, Julia, about how you map your branching paths, and I believe you're going to be getting into that in more detail in just a bit. Is that right?
Yeah, I will be.
Great. So we'll save that one. Another question that we had is how that interactivity was actually added, what you were just showing us. To answer that question, that was not added in Vyond. We will be showing an example with a Vyond video and game agency interactivity added on top of it. So that was not from Vyond, it was from the game agency. Do we have any more questions right now? Let's see. One person's asking how many scenarios to include in one learning module. I'll let you answer that, Julia. How many scenarios would you include in one module?
I think it just depends on what the learning content and objectives that you want to get across are. If they're usually for scenarios, you want to keep it to one instance. You don't want to have it like very long or ongoing because these scenarios tend to make a lot of content. So because you're going down different paths and there's different responses for answers, there's a lot of content. So you do want to keep it relatively short, but you want to, a lot of times the soft skills are based on interactions. So, thinking about like if it's customer service and a common mistake is maybe talking to somebody over the phone and not coming across nicely or something. So you would want to set up that instance and you would want to have a few interactions, maybe like 6 or 7 of a process going through them going through a call center for some, for example, and, just finding out the common mistakes and then presenting them a scenario so you can have your call center employees go through a scenario and practice out what they would do if they're faced with a distraught client or if they're faced with, somebody, whatever you're trying to teach.
Okay,
but
great.
You don't want it to go too long. You don't want it to be an hour-long phone call, right? It would be just a few interactions.
Agreed. And similarly, we tell our customers for video, about 2 minutes is kind of the sweet spot. 2 minutes, maybe a little bit longer is okay. But yeah, you don't want to go too deep down a scenario. And then similarly, someone is asking, you mentioned that you don't have a right or wrong scenario. How far down each path would you go? I think you'll be getting into that in more detail as well. Is that right?
I will be, but I think you want to go down far enough to see that action play out. So instead, like, let's say I have a customer and they're distraught and maybe I'm doing all of the wrong things. I just don't want one action of like me saying something wrong and then being like, oh, the end. I need to usually that customer will still interact with me maybe 2 or 3 times before ending it. It doesn't mean that I have to go through the entire process, but it just needs to feel realistic. It shouldn't feel cut like, oh, you handled this wrong, the end. It should be like, oh, you're handling this wrong and the customer is getting more and more upset. Can you bring it back, or are you going to continue to go down this wrong path until they walk out the door or hang up on you? So you just want to follow through that experience as it makes sense.
Great. And then last question for now before you continue on. Can you clarify again the uncanny valley?
Sure. So the uncanny valley is when you try to use computer graphics or art in a very realistic way, but you don't quite get there. And as a result, you end up making something look a little creepy. This happens when you're doing something, you're trying to be as photorealistic as possible, and it just doesn't end up being lifelike, and it gets picked up subconsciously as I'm interfacing with something that doesn't seem like a human.
Sure.
And yeah, so that can come off a little weird. And again, the best way to avoid that is use real people. They can be photographs, it doesn't have to be animated. But if you use real people, I'll look at that and be like, oh, it's a real person. Likewise, if you're using animation or if you're using CG, keep it stylized in a way that isn't super photorealistic, right? Keep it stylized so that when I look at it, I'm not instantly like, there's something a little off with the eyes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, thank you everyone for the questions. Do keep them coming. We're going to be answering them via chat, and then we'll have another question break shortly. Back over to you, Julia.
All right. So I'm going to continue on to process. So the first thing to do when you want to make a scenarios for your training is to sit down and think about the learning objectives and the common mistakes that your employees or your learners are doing. You want to think about, again, it's very important to think about common mistakes because you want to present those mistakes as actual options so they can go through and experience those mistakes and see what's wrong with it and then learn from it. And the more you can think about all of the learning objectives and as fine as you can write them out, the better, because they're going to help you inform you on creating or building those scenarios or building those narratives that will support your objectives. Once you have your objectives all listed out, you can start mapping out the possibilities. There's a lot of different tools that you can use. I'm a very visual person, so I love flowcharts, and I use a tool called Draw.io because it interfaces very nicely with Google Drive and allows me to share in real time with other coworkers. And what I'll do is I'll start, taking that list of learning objectives, thinking about what's the scenario that I'm entering my employees into, what are they dealing with, what are the options that I could possibly take in there, and then where do those options lead? And then thinking about like which ones are suboptimal, which ones are the best, which ones don't matter in terms of whether or not they are meaningful, or if they're just used as narrative tools. Or you can also use a spreadsheet if that's more up your alley, breaking things down into scenes, where they go to, what's happening in those scenes, and any feedback response. So it's basically just a personal preference, but I definitely find flowcharting to be the most helpful. Once you've mapped out your possible outcomes, you can start to see some patterns that might point to problems. One of them that's common is called the pine tree problem, and this is where you're starting to map out a scenario and you just have one long trunk and you have short branches that are coming out. And this usually signifies that you're not paying attention to your suboptimal or your mistakes. You're kind of ending them shortly. It's just something to look for when you're developing it. If you see like that all of your mistakes are ending the game very, very quickly, maybe take another step at analyzing what could happen in that story to further illustrate the consequences instead of just having it end. Likewise, you'll need to think about reducing content as needed. Scenarios tends to branch out. It's a branching narrative, and there can be a lot of different branches that come from it. And one way to avoid this is to think about conjunction spots. I typically think about process as conjunction spots. These are spots that will take the branches and kind of funnel them through a certain event that happens and then continue outward. And this is just a way to reduce all of those branches. You're kind of gathering them all up, funneling them through, and then branching them back out again. I use process. So for example, if I were working on a hotel scenario, I'm probably going to give somebody that's checking in a card, a key card. I might have ticked off that person. I might have made them really happy, but I'm still going to give them a key card. You still need to think about the world state. So if I ticked you off and I give you a key card, you're probably still going to be pretty mad. If I made your day and I give you a key card, you're probably going to stay satisfied. You still have to think about those outcomes, but it's just using the key card as a way to gather up all of those loose ends and kind of funnel them through to reduce content. And once you have all of that mapped out, you have the story out, it's great to put it in a game engine and adjust and test and see what it's like so you can reiterate on it. And this is where the training arcade comes in. The training arcade is a really great DIY tool. We have 8 total games. We're just talking about one, which is scenarios, but we have a variety of other games that do other types of learning techniques. All of our games are multilingual, so if you need this to be translated in other languages, it's really easy to add a language. You can create content really fast, and you don't need any coding required, and I'll give you a demo in a minute. It's also multi-platform, so you publish it once, and it's accessible on PC and phones, on tablets. We have an analytics dashboard, so once you have this content and you want to give it out to your employees, you can get some analytics back to analyze how your players are doing, or your learners are doing, what mistakes they're making, what they're doing correctly, how long are they playing, all that stuff. And we also have a free 14-day trial. So I'm just going to go quickly and see, I'm going to make a demo really quick. So this is the training arcade, and we have various games. I'm in the scenarios, which is the one we're talking about, and I'm just going to make a demo game name. On this screen that I'm in is like the main variable defaults. So you can select basic things like if you want a timer, how many questions are required to pass. Most of this stuff you can select no. If you want the tutorial shown or not, what kind of authorization or registration you have. And we also have standard art themes that you can choose that will automatically populate your UI. And once you have those done, you can start adding content. So adding a slide will add some content. I love the poll and the info slide. Those are usually what I use. So for example, I'm going to say guest enters scene. Maybe I'll spell guest right. Cool. And then it'll say go to next question. So let's add a question. I'll add a slide again. I'll make it a poll this time. Say no, and I'll say, hi, how are you doing? I hope you need help with language. Okay, so there we go. We have a first question, and now we just need some slides for responses. So I'm going to add another slide. So title 3. Checking in, please. Info slide. 4. I have lots of luggage. So you would take your content that you have already made and you would just start plugging it in. And then when you have some slides, you can go back to your questions and you can map them out. So, hi, how are you doing? I'll put this through intro 3. You'd make better titles than me, but I'm just trying to go really fast for the sake of this demo. All right, and then I will save my game and check for errors. Let's see, what errors do I have? Oh, no, it's okay. No, it's okay. All right, save. Great, so this, once the game is saved, then you can launch it and you can test it right away. And this is the great thing about scenarios. It's very, very easy to get a game up and running. So here we have, let's see if I can fix this. Guest enter scene, okay. Do you need help with your luggage? Sure. Yes, I have tons of luggage. So that's as easy as it is to start building these out. And then of course, once you've done a few iterations, then you can go back and add some art, and it's really easy to add it. You can add images, you can add audio, you can add video. You can also change the layout. So we have various ways depending on how your art is set up. If you want the content to be on the left, right, center, or the full screen. You can choose that. And it auto updates. So as soon as you save the game, you can relaunch it and it saves. So it's a really great tool to get scenarios in. All right, so I'll also be going over really quickly 3 separate games that we've made, all using the Training Arcade. But as you can see, they have various different uses in terms of soft skills. So there's the sales enablement in healthcare, customer service, and internal communication. And we all have different art styles, as you can guess. And these are all using the game agency, the Training Arcade. So the first one is a hospitality game, and this is using Vyond. So you're probably, most people seem on this call to be very familiar with Vyond, which is a really cool video editing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Here I have a leaderboard, so this is an option that you can turn on and off. If you want to have a leaderboard at the end, you enter your name, and you can play through the game. And here we have a series of events. So this is the situation, the guest entering, hit continue. Okay, I have a few choices. I'm checking in.
Checking in.
Yep, okay. Hit continue, and I have a few responses. Oh, you look tired. You must have had quite the trip. Again, not too much feedback. Let the video or let the scenario or the story play out and give me the feedback.
Don't even get me started. The wonderful people at Firefly lost my luggage, and I have an important presentation with a big client tomorrow.
All right. So as you can see, again, simple interactions and letting the story kind of play out and let people go through various options to see how they should respond in this kind of environment. All right. Next, we have an internal communication, and this is using eLearning Brothers asset library, which they'll speak to. So here we have, using their stock library, we have offices and various people, and we have the learning objectives here that you can put through if you want learners to have a little bit of content or context before they start. And again, going through and picking out various scenarios and getting feedback from their coworkers. And the last one is using video. And we have leaderboards. And here's an example of the default tutorial that we have in case you want to use various features in the UI. You can have a tutorial that shows a little bit about the game before you start playing.
Hi, yes, I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you, but I really don't have time to talk. If you leave your card, I'll get back to you.
And then you have various responses.
Okay, but we'll have to keep it short. What do you want to talk about?
All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over. Do we have any more questions?
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Julia. We have a lot of really great questions. First off, I do want to let everyone know that this webinar will be recorded. And also, Julia was just playing a portion of the games. We will be sending you the games so that you can play them on your own. And of course, there's a little bit of a lag when we do a webinar, so it'll be a better experience when you play it on your own computer. So let's kick it off with questions. We have a lot of people asking really specifically about what you can do once you're done with the game, where you can put it. So Julia, can you talk about how this exports, if you can put them into something like Storyline, if you can add them to an LMS, how exactly can people use a game once they create it in the Training Arcade?
I think maybe Jennifer might have a better question, but I mean, there's a lot of flexibility to where you can put these games. They're based on, a web engine, and they can interface with a lot of company training materials already, so they can be imported as part of your training materials. There's a lot of different options. I'm just not 100% sure.
I have John McDonald here, who's one of the managing partners. He can answer that question in a little bit more depth.
Yeah, the quick overview is that that we built the platform to be really flexible and allow you to publish the games that you create in a variety of locations. So from the tool, every game that you create generates a unique web URL, so the games can be played online, and that link can be provided to your employees or your audience directly. It also allows you to take that link and embed it as a web object into a variety of the e-learning authoring tools. And we also support SCORM, and directly from the tool, you can download SCORM packages to seamlessly load and embed into your variety of LMSs out there. So we have some deeper integrations as well. We support the Learning Tool Interoperability Standard, the LTI, and so lots of flexibility, but it was really made to allow you to make the game in the tool and take anywhere you need it.
Great, thank you both. I hope that answers everyone's questions around that, but feel free if you have more, we can ask at the end. And thank you for mentioning about SCORM compliance. We did have a few people asking that question. So let's see. Julia, have you ever used this, or Richard, if you want to jump in, have you ever used this for systems training? For example, giving a participant decisions that they need to make in a system that requires higher thinking skills?
System that requires higher thinking skills. I mean, we have definitely done these for practices and procedures, but most of that has been, even with the past practices and procedures, there's been an element of communication. Now, this tool is really flexible, so if you want it to be less like a scenarios tool and more like a quiz, you're also able to do that. Depending on, if you remember those slides that I was entering, there's an option for multiple choice as well. So you can answer some questions that are more based on a quiz instead of a narrative structure.
Yeah, and I would add to that you know, we've definitely, the tool's been used to create training for like safety and compliance, you know, product training around a new product, and sort of complex components of product training. So you know, it definitely has the flexibility to allow for the variety of training that most of our customers are encountering.
Great, great. Thank you both. Another question for you, Julia. So if a user makes a wrong choice, how do you get them back on the path to the narrative of the story?
There's a couple of ways to do it, and I think it depends on what you want to teach. Sometimes it's just if they make the wrong path, then they continue down a wrong path and they can't quite get back to that optimal place. If the mistake that they made is really critical, then you might want to consider, you know, a point of no return, but you still want the scenario to play out showing those consequences. If it's something that's minor, then there should, you know, it's pretty easy to build in responses that will lead back. So maybe you've ticked off the customer a little bit, but you can go back and bring the conversation back by, you know, either apologizing or saying the right things, or opening up the conversation, or trying to pry more information so you have more information from the person you're communicating with in order to open up options. So this is all very, very flexible, and it's all sort of based on how you want the training to happen.
Great, thank you. One more question for now, and then we do have 2 more question breaks, or 1 more break and then questions at the end. Someone is asking if this, everything that you've talked about so far, if this will only work with the scenario game template from the training arcade. So to start, a lot of what you shared can be applied, you know, in any tool, not just the tool that we're showing. But if you could speak, Julia, to the scenario game template versus other templates that you have available, and maybe the differences.
Sure, we have 8 games in total, but they're all vastly different. So the scenarios game is one that is doing something called branching narrative, like kind of like what we talked about. Other games are things that are more apt for quizzes, things like a platformer where you answer quiz questions, or match 3 where you answer quiz questions. There's Jeopardy. There's other tools for learning that are a little different and structured in a way, maybe not about open communications or sandboxing, but more about, you know, having those correct or incorrect answers.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Now let's have Trent talk a little bit about the eLearning Brothers. Trent?
Fantastic. Happy to be on here, and I love listening to that, Julia, because I learn something different every time. So I like jumping through all those. So let me go ahead and I'll become the presenter here. Present my screen. All right. So there we go. So we have, if you're not familiar with eLearning Brothers, we know a bunch of them that are on. We've been around for a decade now, over a decade, and doing a lot in the corporate learning industry. So as you can see, we offer a lot of different assets that we're going to go in here, but we also offer some off-the-shelf courses. We offer games working with the game agency, as well as some tools for helping author and edit your courses. So a few other things that we want to dive into here is really our asset library, because that is something that we have found is so popular. That's really how eLearning Brothers got started, and we offer over 3 million assets to choose from, which is plenty to work with. These can be added into any e-learning authoring tool that you have. It can be added into the Vyond videos. It can be added into the games in the training arcade, a lot of things. So we're going to show really how easy it is to find and get exactly what you need. Perhaps our most popular library is our Cutout People library. You notice these as well in the examples that Julia was showing. So we have those based on all sorts of characters, each with a wide range of poses and emotions that can allow you to convey the exact emotion that you want. You can drill down into that based off of the different categories. Or if you go ahead and just from the top down menu, you can take a look at, okay, from the Cutout People, what other library we want to get into, and drill down to a specific area really easy that way. There's also the search feature that lets you jump into looking for some specific needs you have. And then you'll notice once you get into the results, over on the left, you have a lot of other filters that you can use. So for example, different actions that I want somebody, if I want somebody showing with their arms folded or the thumbs up, you can see down the list there, even down to hair type or the different industry or props that somebody is working with. A lot of things that can really get down to the specific industry that you're in, environment you're in, or job roles that you're after. These are also available in series. So if there is a character that you want, rather than have to find a lot of multiple poses on your own, we have those set as series. So here is one that you can see in the lab coat. And you can even see the different angles and even from the back. So if you've got somebody that's engaged in a conversation on screen rather than just face-to-face with you, you could be showing some dialogue and one of them facing opposite or facing each other, so it looks more realistic. And then you can download the entire series, or you can download just an image, a specific image itself. So that is one of the most popular ones that we have to work into a lot of these learning courses that we have. Another popular library is our stock assets library. And those cover images and vector images as well as the audio and videos. Likewise, you can dive into different categories. With over 3 million stock assets for you to take a look at, there's a real need to have a good search feature, which this does, which is the beauty of it. So for example, if I'm looking for something with an office setting, I'm seeing about 200,000 results. Along the top, we have different filters. So for example, I can take a look at a different scene and say, well, do I want it indoor? Do I want it outdoor? I can narrow it down by subject, by pose. a lot of different things to help you narrow down specifically to the situation that you're after. And the same thing can be done with the video, including 360 video and VR, as well as the audio library that you can get into and download those files and insert them likewise in any tool that you're working with. The icon library is the last one that I wanted to mention. Over 50 popular categories that you can drill down into different icons, and likewise with the same search features that are there. The beauty of these are vector art and SVG files. So they're 100% editable, so they can be resized to any size without loss of quality. You can also change the coloring and other things that you need to fit your brand, your style, the setting that you're putting those into. So there's quite a lot. So that's a huge resource that's available for folks. And if you want to get started on it, we have a free trial, a 7-day free trial that you can get signed up with. If you just jump onto our homepage at elearningbrothers.com, you can go ahead and grab some assets yourself to see how easy it is to find what you're looking for, and then to be able to insert those in some of your courses. So I'm going to jump back on to get my webcam back on here for questions as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trent. The first question that I'm going to ask is actually over to the game agency. Jennifer, if you could let us know. We have people asking if the training arcade is 508 compliant, and then also if it's available with X API. Can you speak to both of those questions real quick?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yes, they are XAPI compliant. And as for 508, we are working on it. Joe, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, some of the games are better suited for that. So Jeopardy and Trivia and some games like that are already 508 compliant, and some of the games are just a little bit more complex in terms of the interactions on them. So the short answer is not all of the games, but some of the games are.
Awesome, thank you. And then Trent, we do have a few ELB questions, and if anybody has more, please send them over. First question is, are the images and videos on eLearning Brothers unique to you? This person that's asking already has an iStock photo subscription and notice a little bit of crossover. Can you speak to those differences?
There will be some crossover in some categories. So you may be able to find some of those from other sources with the stock images. So they're not all unique to eLearning Brothers.
Great. And then another question is about branded clothing. So this particular person needs their people to have branded clothing. We run into this on the Vyond end. There's some branding that you can do with the outfits, but then any further customization would have to be, something that we work together to create. Is there any possibility of maybe using Photoshop to edit something that you download from the eLearning Brothers, or anything else that you can do to help people stay branded?
Yep, absolutely. And just like the example that I showed with the lab coat, those are generic in those character cutout people. So you can throw on logos there. You can edit those. Those will come across in the file type of your choice. So even as if you pull those as a JPEG or an image file, that you'll be able to take into Photoshop and change some elements of those and then add those in. So yes, you can do customization to add your own branding elements or colors to those as well.
Great, thank you. And then I have another training arcade question, and we'll see if there's more for you, Trent, in just a second. Is the training arcade available for individual businesses to use, or do you need to go through the game agency to use those templates?
So the game agency is the company that created the training arcade, which is the tool, and you buy a subscription based on the number of people in your company and based on how many games you want. So it's pretty simple. Once you sign up, you get a domain and you can start building games with your content right away.
Yeah, I think the question is the tool itself allows you to create the templates that map to your training and your services. So Julia demoed a number of templates that she created, but in and of itself, we don't sell a series of baked templates about different training topics with scenarios. You buy a license to the scenarios tool, which allows you to build branching narrative scenarios. And you can make an unlimited number of those training courses as you'd like, as long as you have a subscription to scenarios.
Great, thank you so much for that clarification. I think that answers a couple questions. We're going to now kick it over to Erin Champion to chat with us about Vyond, for those of you that haven't used it before.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin, and I'll be talking a little bit more about Vyond. Just to give you an overview of what Vyond is, it's a web-based video creation platform. It's all point and click, drag and drop, so you don't have to have experience creating videos before you start using Vyond. Just to give you an idea of the output, once you're done creating your video, you get an MP4 file that you could then import into a tool like the Training Arcade to build these branching scenarios that Julia was showing you. You can also import images, audio, and video into Vyond, so you can take content from the eLearning Brothers and bring it into Vyond. So I'll show you a little bit of how you can do that, and I'm gonna show my screen in just a second. It looks like it's right there, and we'll get to building at least a short video that you can use in your training. So I'm going to use a similar example to what Julia had showed in Vyond previously. So how to maybe do training for someone at a hotel front desk. So this is the tool. It's web-based. Again, I'm just on my internet browser. And what I'll do here once I'm inside is I'm just going to go ahead and add a scene. So I'll click Add Scene here, and I'll choose Template. So here, lots of different templates in different industries, different areas of business to choose from. I'm just going to type in hotel and see what I get. And you'll notice that I have a bunch of hotel examples that are already available for me. So this looks similar to what Julia was showing before. So I'm going to choose this one, and then I'm going to customize it just a little bit. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and delete that text right there. And then I'm going to adjust a couple things in this scene. So instead of having this kind of customer facing the audience, I'm going to delete him. I only want to have one person behind the desk, so I'll go ahead and remove this character as well. All I'm doing is clicking the character and hitting the delete button. Next, I'll kind of center this character over here. And now I'm going to customize this a little bit more. One of the neat things about Vyond is you can actually create your own characters. This will really help your audience to identify with the character on the screen a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and click the replace button up here in the top right, and I'm actually going to search in my library over here for my own character. So I'll type in my name and I'll see what comes up. So lots of different styles to choose from. Maybe I want my character to be a little more dressed up, so I'll go ahead and choose this one right here. So now, depending on the company that you work for, if you have someone who's very recognizable to, a broad range of people at the company, nice to make a character that's going to be similar to that person. Another thing I can do just to kind of bring the character a little bit more to the foreground is I can go ahead and select some of the different props here and make them a little bit bigger. So we're just kind of bringing her to the front. So now that I've selected those, just by holding the shift key and clicking, I can make them all bigger all at once. So now she's a little bit more in the foreground. It's a little bit easier to see her. From there, you saw in Julia's example that the character was actually talking. So I'm going to add my voice to the character. In order to do that, I click on the character right here. I'll go ahead and click the dialogue button, and I'll choose Add Dialogue. You can add a mic recording, or you can import an audio track that has already been recorded, but I'm going to click mic recording right now. And we'll just say, hello, welcome. How can I help you today? Now that I've recorded my voice, it's attaching to the character. And the neat thing is that the dialogue that I just recorded will actually sync to the character's lips. So you'll see when she's talking, it really looks like it's me talking. I'm going to go ahead and delete this first scene right here. And then we'll go ahead and do one more thing, and I'll preview this for you so you can see just how easy it is to create at least one portion of your training scenario. So I'll click on this character, and just to make her a little bit more welcoming and more inviting, I can come up here to the expression. I'll go ahead and click expression, and instead of according to action, let's change this up. So, depending on the scenario that you're creating, maybe she's angry, right? We can click there. Obviously, she doesn't look super happy. We can move down here. Maybe we want her to be a little bit more inviting. So we'll go ahead and choose the happy option. But you'll notice how you can really use the expression depending on the path that your character goes down, or the path that your learner goes down, to really give them feedback as to how they're doing. So I'll go ahead and preview this just so everyone can see it. The only preface that I'll add in here is that because we are on a screen share, sometimes the lip sync doesn't look exactly perfect, but I promise if you play it for yourself, it'll be perfectly synced. So we'll go ahead and preview there.
Hello, welcome. How can I help you today?
Alrighty. Once you're done, you can go ahead and hit the save button, and then your video is instantly downloadable. So when I go ahead and click the download video option, you'll notice that video actually just downloaded right here in the bottom. And from there, I can use that MP4, put it into any platform that I want, whether it be an LMS, an e-learning authoring tool, up to you what you choose. So that's the quick info on how to build a scene or start a video in Vyond. And I think we probably have some questions, so I'll go ahead and see what Amanda has for me.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. Yeah. We do have a lot of questions coming through. Maybe you can all hear me a little bit better now. We do have a lot of questions coming through. First question is actually not for you, Erin, but if you do have Vyond questions, please send them in. We'll be asking those in just a second. Question again for the training arcade, lots of questions for you guys. What happens, let's say a year down the road, if somebody does have a subscription for creating games? What happens to the content that they can create, that they've created? Do they keep it, or does it live on your platform? What happens to that? Richard or Jennifer, can you jump in?
Sure. So basically, every time you create a game on the Training Arcade platform, it creates basically a unique website for that content. So all of it, they're all web-based games. So that content is served up from our side, and when your subscription ends, there's a period of time, 6 months after the subscription, where those games remain live. But at some point after a subscription is ended and that grace period is over, then the games become unaccessible. So the reason why we have them online, the reason why we serve them up, is because it allows you in real time. You can go into any of the games and courses you've created, make a change to that course, and hit the save button, and immediately all of your learners will have access to that updated content. So we're web-based, we're a SaaS-based solution, so kind of need to always have the lights turned on the subscription for the content to be live.
So I'm not sure why that is cutting out. So apologies, Richard. I'm gonna ask the next question. I'm not sure what happened to your audio, but we do have a lot of Vyond questions coming in, and if we have other game agency questions, we can jump back over to them. But first off, Erin, people have a lot of questions about creating characters, both how do you create a character, and then how do you make them move seamlessly across the screen?
Okay, great. So the first thing I'll do is I'll show you how to actually make a character move across the screen. And then I'll show you how to kind of make some edits or adjust your character if you want. So the first thing that I'm going to do, say you wanted this character to exit the screen. So what I would do in this case is once she's done talking, I'll go ahead and click this plus button down here in the timeline. And from here, I'm going to choose this option, continue last scene. This lets me give the character a new action. So I'll go ahead and click on the character here. I'm going to come up to action and I'm going to type in walk. Okay, so there are tons of different ways that she could be walking. You know, she could be walking maybe a little angry. She could be kind of skipping along. I'm going to hide this. I just want her to walk fairly normally. So we'll scroll down here and let's see. I think this one is probably the one I want. Yeah. Just a nice casual walk. So I'll go ahead and apply this action to the character. But what you'll notice is if I previewed the video right now, my character would just be walking in place. I want her to move from one area to another. So in order to do that, I'm going to come up here to this motion path button and I'm going to choose add motion path. Okay, so now you see there's two images of my character where she'll start on the right and where she'll end on the left. I actually want her to move off the screen to the other side, so I'm just going to drag her endpoint until she walks off right here. And now when I preview this, you'll see how the two scenes come together. She'll do her, intro, and then she'll actually walk out of the scene. So let me go ahead and hit the preview button so you can see what that looks like.
Hello, welcome. How can I help you today?
There we go. You also notice that she kind of walked behind this vase. So just to show you how I fix that, all I'm going to do is right click on this vase here. I'll go ahead and hit send to back. And maybe I want to make her walk just a teensy bit faster, okay? She was kind of leisurely strolling. I can even adjust the speed that she'll walk. To do that, all I'm going to do is click this button over here on the bottom left, which expands the timeline. And then I'm just going to make it so that she walks much quicker by adjusting the length or the duration of her motion path. So now you'll see when I preview this, and I'll just preview from scene number 2, how that will change things. So we'll go ahead and click preview there. Okay, so much faster that she's walking that time. And I think I still need to send this all the way to the back. There we go. Alrighty, so we went over how to make a character move across the screen. The next thing that I'm going to do is show you how you might edit a character or create a character of your own. So I'll come up here to the character tab, and maybe I just wanted to make a few adjustments to the character that I have right here. What I can do is click the More button. So we'll go ahead and click right there. And then I'm going to choose to copy and edit the character. So this won't edit this actual character on the screen, but it'll make a copy of the character. So we'll click Save and Go. And this brings me to the character creator. There's 3 different styles of animation to choose from. The one that I'm working in right now is business friendly. So say I wanted to make a couple adjustments, my hair's a little bit longer now. So we'll go ahead and click this button over here where it says hair. And now you can see all the different hairstyles that we have available. So maybe I just want to choose something like this, make it a little bit longer. Perfect. We'll come over here. One other thing that I always like to point out is the eyes. So we have some different eyes that are available to use. The thing that I like about the eyes down here on the bottom is notice how they kind of blink up and down, so they're a little bit more expressive. If I wanted to change the shape, I can just choose that. And then I can even be, as specific as to change the eye color. Moving over here to top, maybe I just want to change the color of the blazer. You could actually, if we click on this color swatch, you can type in an RGB or a hex code to make it the exact color of your company's uniform or blazer. I'm just going to choose, maybe we'll make it red instead of blue. Once you're done changing the different aspects of your character, you can go ahead and hit the save button. And then from here, this is going to bring me back to Vyond Studio. Once this is loaded up, I'll just show you how, once I make those adjustments, I can actually change the character across all the scenes, and then I'll send it back over to Amanda. So once this loads up.
Thanks, Erin. And while that is loading, I do have a question that I can answer in the meantime. Okay. Someone is asking both if you can try Vyond for free, and yes, we do have a 14-day free trial at vyond.com. And then also, same question that we asked the Training Arcade, what happens once you create your content if you no longer have a subscription? And the answer to that is, once you create your content in Vyond and you export it, that MP4 is yours for forever, whether you have a subscription or not. But you would need a subscription if you want to edit that video in Vyond. And similarly, for the person asking, you can't import someone else's Vyond video into your account to edit. If you did want to edit someone else's video, you would need to have a team license, which would allow you to share with members on your team, members of your team, to edit videos together.
Great. Okay, so just to show you how you would change that character that I just made a couple edits to out for the character that I have in my scene. With a professional subscription, you have the ability to switch from stage view to asset view. So once I switch over here to asset view, you'll notice that I can see all of the different assets that I have across these two scenes. So if I want to change this character in both of the scenes at once, all I need to do is click on the character here, come up to the replace button in the top right, move back over to where it says character, and then we've got my character right here. So I'm going to click on her. And now notice that will change the character across these two scenes. So if I switch back to stage view, now I can see that the character has been changed across those scenes. When you think about a video that you maybe have 100 scenes in, this mode can be really useful.
Great, thank you. I have 3 more Vyond questions that I'm going to ask you. We are a little bit over time. The main portion of the webinar is over, but we do have many hundreds of people still on the line. So we're happy to stick around for just a bit longer to answer some more of your questions. So if you do have questions, whether it's about Vyond for Erin or about the Training Arcade or eLearning Brothers, we'll try to answer as many of those as we possibly can in chat, and a couple of them live. But Erin, I have another question back to the motion path and having the character move. Do you happen to have any pro tips on matching up the speed and duration of the motion path to get the action to look as realistic as possible?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say playing around with it in preview mode is going to be the most useful way to kind of fine tune your the speed of the motion path in your video. So for instance, I'll just go ahead and click, let me expand the timeline again. To do that, you just come over here to the bottom left and click right there. And once I've done that, and I'm just gonna make the stage area a little bit bigger so it's easier for everyone to see, we can go ahead and click preview right here. So once I see that, you know, maybe I think she's walking a little bit too fast. All I did to stop that preview was I hit the space bar. From there, I can adjust the speed. So by making this a little bit longer, now it's going to take her longer to walk from point A to point B. Once I've done that, I'll hit the space bar. And there we go. So I think fine-tuning the speed of your actions and the speed of your motion paths in preview is going to be the quickest way to do it because you get real feedback. You're able to make those edits in the timeline, click preview, and then adjust accordingly.
Great, thank you. And then another person is asking, what would creating scenarios look like in Vyond? So you've been creating one scenario this whole time, and that was the specific scenario that we used in the game that was played earlier. Can you just give sort of an overview of what other types of scenarios might be possible or templates that exist?
Yeah, so I mean, you can create quite a few different types of scenarios depending on the type of business that you're in, the type of industry. If you click the add scene button, just to give you an idea of the templates that are available right out of the box in Vyond, if I click choose template, notice we have categories for catering and like restaurants, education, finance, HR. I mean, I'm just scrolling through them pretty quickly here, but lots of different options to help get you started. The other thing that you can do if you don't find something that maybe meets your exact need is you can always import into Vyond. We were talking about the eLearning Brothers. They have such a huge library of different assets to use. If you wanted to incorporate something from their site, you could do something like this. If I just go ahead and click add a blank scene, if you wanted to start from scratch, we can come over here to the upload section. And from here, you'll actually see I have some assets that I imported from their library. So you can start to kind of create a video that's going to look a little bit more maybe like some of the trainings that you had already created using eLearning Brothers assets here. So, you know, we put a couple plants in here. We make them a little bit smaller. We can add different props so you can build from scratch if you want. If I click the background here, notice when I click on the background, I can choose locations. So maybe we are in an airport, right? There we go. And now we started to create something that looks and feels a little bit different. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. Another question that I know you get this question a lot.
Yeah.
How can people brand their characters?
Okay.
Either their outfits, you showed the character creator a little bit,
Mhm.
but specifically the question around adding a branded logo to a t-shirt, if you could
Gotcha.
speak to that.
Okay, yeah, so let me go ahead and choose another template here just to give us an idea. So I'll go back over to, let's just go to layouts, okay? So say you had a character who is introducing, a concept. The first thing I'm gonna do is, like before, I'll go ahead and replace this character with another character, maybe someone that just has a more simple top. Again, I'll find my character so you can see some of the different options. Let's choose this one. Okay. So say I wanted to add, maybe I'll choose something that's just a little more simple in terms of shirt. There we go. So say I wanted to add like a Vyond logo to this character. The way that I would have to do that is by adding a PNG and putting it on top of the character here. So once I have my character in place, I'll go ahead and I'll move to the upload section. I'm just gonna type in Vyond to find the logos that I have. This one looks good. So now that I have that selected, I'll go ahead and bring it down to size. And you can adjust it pretty well. The only limitation really is when your character starts to move around, it can look a little funny because the characters have some nuanced actions, right? When they're walking, they may walk kind of up and down and bounce up and down, and the Vyond logo simply wouldn't do that. So what I would say the limitation right now is keeping the logo on a static character, but we are opening up the ability to actually build characters for companies that have the logo attached to them. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can definitely email us at support and we can dig into that conversation. But from the platform today, this is how you would do it, just by bringing a PNG of your logo in and placing it on top of the character.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that email is support@vyond.com. If you have any questions for Erin about the adding logos to t-shirts or something else that our support team can answer for you, feel free to email them there. And it looks like our moderators have answered a vast majority of the questions via chat. So I'm not going to ask Erin any other questions today. So that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. And if there's anything else that you need to know from us, feel free to let us know in the survey at the end of the webinar, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.